We are indeed a gifted community. I feel so gifted when we get an opportunity to open up our time together in celebration with song, which is a thanksgiving, and then when we get to open it with a bomb prayer. You know, that prayer just helped me to feel so centered. What's happening? Look at all these beautiful faces here tonight. What a joy it is to greet you in the name of love and to know that right where you are, God is. I want to thank in advance our practitioner, Sherry, who's radiating the light in the back. Her consciousness is simply still and knowing the perfect unfoldment of our revealing experience tonight. And tonight, maybe like every Wednesday night, you will have a revealing experience. That there is something said or read or shared or sung, or that you might look at the person that you came with, or maybe even someone who's sitting in the same row, or look behind and catch a glance, and that be a revelation in itself. You know, my talk title for today is the highs and the lows. And this year, we've been reading the Science of Mind book a little bit at a time. We've been taking this big book called The Science of Mind, and we're taking it a few pages at a time, a few paragraphs at a time, a few meditations at a time, because we have an index, and every day it gives us which pages to read, so it's not just from cover to cover, because that can be boring. But indeed, just kind of going from place to place to place, we're able to get a comprehensive understanding of the words of Ernest Holmes, and Ernest Holmes being the founder of religious science, science of mind philosophy. He is guiding us to recognize a couple of things. A, that there's one power, one presence, one life, and we call it God, but we can actually call it anything we want to. We've accepted this terminology of God because it's a title like woman or man, but it's just a title or a space holder. What we know of G-O-D, God, or Jody, G-O-D, is this love, intelligence, this perfection, this power, this eternal life, this energetic that has created everything out of itself. Therefore, we have our living and our beingness encompassed in the allness that is God. God is life, love, eternal life. We give God these qualities and these names. Some of us call it Allah or Jesus or Buddha or the great I am. Whatever it is that we call it, it ain't mad at you for calling it. The thing is that we recognize that our life is indeed that very same life. It is an outpicturing and a manifestation of the one. The wholeness that God is, I am. The joy that God is, I am. The peace that God is, I am. And Ernest Holmes wants us to just be anchored in that truth, that there is nothing, no thing that separates your life from that life that is God. It is an impossibility for there to be a separation in my life and the life of God, or your life and the life of God, and that there is this idea that in God we are one. We express differently and beautifully and magnificently in these earthly flesh suits, and we get to have different textures of hair and eye colors and skin complexions and different organs and different body parts, and they get to move and have their being in us in different ways. But it is still the way, the perfect way that God is expressing. And to the degree in which I begin to really embrace that and know that for myself, it's to the degree in which I feel the freedom that comes from living this life that is God as me. To the degree in which you embrace it, you get to have that life of God as you. But what has happened along the way for many of us is that we have been brainwashed, bamboozled, tricked, taught, raised to believe that somehow or another we as human beings or mere human beings are not good enough to be one with this power and this presence. And we have begun to adopt that belief and assimilate to that and begin to live as if that's the truth. And as a matter of fact, the more and more distance that we can put between this idea of God, the God self, and the I am self, the more distance we can put between us, the better it is, because after all, I'm just this mere mortal. And we've bought into that idea and that way of thinking so much so that we victimize ourselves, or we become the victim and life happens to us. And as life begins to happen to us, we begin to feel less and less empowered to live the life of our dreams, the life that we're meant to live, the life of God as each and every one of us. But to the degree in which we begin to let go of those ideas, let go of those thoughts, as to the degree in which we're able to kind of cut ourselves loose from the chains and the shackles and the binds and the zip ties. I was at Home Depot. That bind us to these old ideas and these old thoughts, to the degree in which we're able to cut loose from that and free ourselves and really, really dive back into the truth of who we are. It is to that degree in which we begin to really express and live to our fullest. Now, as we begin to reclaim the truth of who we are, we may notice that things get a little difficult, or that things become a little bit challenged. Or as we're tiptoeing through the tulips of life, in our joy and our bliss, we may begin to still have this residual effect of race consciousness that tells us that we're separate from the life that God is, that we're separate from the perfection and the wholeness, that we're separate from the freedom and the eternal life that God is, and we may begin to buy into these ideas of illness and sickness and less than and doubt and fear. We may even begin to believe that the person sitting next to us, across from us, the person in the car on the freeway, that our employer or our employee or our neighbor down the street or even the one right next door to us, we may even begin to believe that all is good except them. Everything is the life of God except that one. How could possibly the life of God live as that one, as mean as she is, or as ornery as that one is, or as low down as that one is? And we begin to forget that God is expressing as each of us. That so as it is the truth of me, it is the truth of each and every one of us. And I know for myself that even as long as we do this work of spiritual unfoldment, of digging deep and of uncovering these hidden beliefs that act as a law unto our lives, there are still these ideas and beliefs that have been so hidden that we've done such a great job, unfortunately, at playing hide and go seek with the truth, and that we've done such a great job at playing hide and go seek with lies, that we've buried lies and misbeliefs, and we've taken these beliefs, these things that we have made assumptions about or come to conclusions about when we were youngsters, and because we gave it a meaning and because it felt a particular way, we now have brought that in within our body temple and begin to now have resentment, anger, fear, doubt, confusion. We begin to believe in separation. We begin to believe that others have powers that we don't. You know, in today's reading in our Science of Mind book, it's a little bit interesting because the talk title is The Highs and the Lows, and it has a lot to do with high blood pressure, low blood pressure, hardened arteries, skin irritations, things of that nature. And it's kind of like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, hello? And yet, we don't know. I mean, you know, lots of us are health conscious. We go to the doctor. The doctor may, in fact, tell us our cholesterol is high or low, or we have anemia, or this or that or the other thing, our blood pressure this, or arteries this, or whatever, and we need to be aware of it. And I'm wondering if we're aware Are we aware? Are you aware that your thoughts have a direct effect on your body temple, on your health, on your wholeness? That these symptoms, that these things that the doctors tell us, that they may have possibly been created at our own hand, if you will, at our own mind, at our own thought, or by our very own thoughts. And I know that sometimes, pun intended, it's a hard pill to swallow. But sometimes when we really begin to take an honest look at our pattern of thought, at the things that we entertain, we can actually begin to see how a groove, if you will, or how a channel or a way of thinking or a pattern has been developed where we have created disharmony, where we have created harm within our own bodies. How many of us have said, oh my gosh, my neighbor, he is such a pain in the neck? Right? Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it, right? We're like, okay, we got a hand over here, over here, over here, right? He has such a pain in the neck. And before you know it, you're kind of like walking around like, oh my God, I have this pain in my neck. Like, what's going on here? What's happening? It is a direct connection with what we entertain. It is a direct connection with our pattern of thought. It is a direct connection with whatever belief has been implanted by us, or maybe an experience or something that happened that we have come to a conclusion about, that we now take in and we now make a belief, and yet we cover it up so strategically so nobody kind of knows that this belief is there. It becomes this hidden belief. And that hidden belief is a law onto our life. And that hidden belief becomes our modus operandi. It becomes that place of where we operate from. And because we operate from that place, it begins to outpicture in our bodies. Breathe. Because I, for one, don't want to look at that kind of stuff. I don't want to be responsible for my own health. I want to, sometimes sit back and go, well, that happened to me. I didn't have nothing to do with it. That happened to me. I'm a victim of whatever. Or there's nothing in my consciousness. I can go to that place of there's nothing in my consciousness. There's nothing that I think about. so vividly and so deeply that it outpictures in my body, like high blood pressure or low blood pressure or hardened arteries. But when I think about how many folks talk about, I'm never going to love again. I'm just going to shut my heart. I'm just going to, and how the outpicturing in the body becomes a hardened heart, a hardened arteries, the body functions not operating properly. That because we have these terms or this jargon that we adopt so easily and so effortlessly, that even though we say it and we don't necessarily mean it because it's just the latest, hipster thing that people are saying these days, but they have an effect because we are so powerful. They have an effect on the outpicturing of our body temple. Ernest Holmes tells us, he says on page 249 today, he says, suppose someone comes to you who has high blood pressure, and meaning if they're coming to me as a practitioner, or even if they're coming to us as a friend, because they know that what we know is that there is no separation, that which is true of God is true of us, that which is true of life is true of us. And when folks come to us because they're seeking a different way to express, because they're seeking to check out how you did it, they recognize that you have adopted and adapted and adopted a new way of living that seems to be working for you, that all of a sudden, you might have been down and out, but you've adopted a way of being and a philosophy and a way of life that has kind of brought you forward into this happy, joyous, and free person who is really enjoying life. And they're coming to you kind of going, well, hey, what's going on? He's talking here specifically about a practitioner. Someone comes to me as a practitioner who has high blood pressure. You wish to treat to remove this sense. Your work will be recognized as a fact if after you've done your work, he can be examined and his blood pressure is found to be normal. Now we know time after time after time of people who use the power of their mind, who use the power of self-healing, who use the power of prayer to heal. I mean, sometimes there are folks who make pilgrimages to other countries to seek out, folks who are said to be healers, when in fact, the healer is you. The healer is you when you take whatever it is that person has said and you recognize that this is the truth of who you are. When Jesus the Christ, in biblical times, when they talked about Jesus the Christ and people who were just trying to touch the hem of his garment, that they believed that he was a healer to the extent that what they believed was, if I touch this hem, if I touch even the outskirt of his garment, I will be healed. There was nothing magical about this man's clothing. What was magic and what was powerful was the belief of the individual who thought, if I touch this place, even just the rim of his garment, I will be healed. And it is the truth today, not that you have to touch the hem of anybody's garment, but if you touch the metaphysical hem of the garment of God itself, of life itself, of love itself, of wholeness itself, if you touch the hem of that particular garment, that if I can just touch it, if I can just be there in consciousness, if I can just recognize that my life is the life of God, that if I can just recognize and know beyond a shadow of a doubt my health and my wholeness, I will be healed. There are people who go right to the doctor, and the doctor goes, I don't know what happened, but it's a miracle. I don't know how this happened. They're baffled. But it is the power of our mind, it is the power of this truth that I speak, in which we can heal the body. Now, sometimes it just starts not with this magical knowing, but for instance, he talks about skin irritation. Now, I know for myself, having a skin irritation is about somebody rubbing me the wrong way. Let's be honest. Somebody's irritating me. I am irritated by somebody. And because I'm irritated by someone's behavior, by what I think I should have and I'm not getting, whether it's a resentment or a fear or a doubt, I have work to do. I have work to do. And the work that needs to be done is that I must step out of denial. Oh, but I'm Reverend Sunshine. After all, haven't I arrived? I've got to get off of any denial of where I think I am, because obviously if I'm experiencing a skin irritation, it's because something is irritating me, and I get to do my work. I get to recognize and get to comb through my experiences and look, sometimes jot it down on paper, sometimes sit with a practitioner so that the practitioner might ask me questions that might reveal this hidden place within me that I'm holding on to a resentment or this idea that someone can irritate me because it is now out picturing in my body temple. Make sense? Yeah. And sometimes I say, this is not sexy work. It's not sexy. You know, when we get to kind of go, oh, yeah, look it. I have these false ideas, these false beliefs. I'm believing in lack or limitation, or I'm totally giving away my power to this individual, or I'm not recognizing where this person is indeed the life of God. To the degree in which they're irritating me, to the degree in which it outpictures in skin irritation, where it burns and it hurts. And it's a crude reminder of the work that we get to do. And the work, again, stepping back, stepping out of denial, being able to review and do an inventory of my life, do an inventory of the people in my life. What is it that I'm possibly denying? Who is it that I'm resentful with, and for what? And what is the lie that I'm believing? What is the lie that I'm believing about myself or about this person that has caused this skin irritation, or has caused this high blood pressure or low blood pressure, the hardening of the arteries, the whatever condition it is that is out picturing in our life? We get to ask the questions. And when we don't want to ask the questions of ourselves and do the work for ourselves, then we get to pull our wallet out and go sit with a practitioner and pay somebody to help us through the process. Unless, of course, we want to deal with the skin irritation, the high blood pressure, the low blood pressure, whatever condition it is that's ailing us. And inevitably, it always comes back to me. This thought or idea that I have that is a lie that I have bought into. This weekend, a bunch of us got to go through this fear to faith process. And the fear to faith process was so skillfully facilitated in such a way that, again, amongst some peers and folks, I was able to excavate, if you will, and just kind of dig up an old wound from the age of 15. And recognize how, well, I call it an old wound, but it ain't so old if it's still active in my life, huh? It's still pretty recent, because it's still active in my life, and it's still out picturing in the way I deal with people, in the way I look at folks, and in the way that I behave in life. And I could really go, whoa, that's pretty ugly, and then go hide and not show up on Wednesday nights till I get it together. Or I could simply just be and kind of go, yeah, you know, part of this work, the spiritual work and the spiritual journey is about uncovering some of the residue and some of the ugly stuff that still lives in me and still informs what I do. And because it still informs what I do, here I am, an adult, being informed by a 15-year-old. Not sexy. But actually, when I was talking with a friend of mine and explaining the process and really being vulnerable and open about the self-discovery, she said, that actually is sexy. That someone could be so interested in being on the spiritual path and the spiritual journey to kind of dig up what doesn't work anymore and look at it for what it is. Name it the lie that it is. You're a lie. You no longer have any power. I release you. And in fact, I take on that which is the truth. Because had I not, if each of us continue to live in denial and continue to just think that, well, life is happening to me, then we will continue to allow these old ideas, these old thoughts, these old way of beings to inform our behaviors. We will continue to hurt one another. We will continue to be resentful to one another. Our body temple will continue to show us and display to us how we have a misperception in our thought, how we have a belief in our body system and in our body temple that is not in agreement with our highest good. And it is there, it is coming up so that it can be looked at, exposed, and called the lie that it is, so that we might embrace and remember the truth of who we are. That we might go deeper in the truth of who we are, turn away and release that which no longer serves us, and fully live a life of freedom. Now that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really being honest enough and being brave enough and courageous enough to look at those things. The truth of the matter is that everybody's looking at their own stuff, so you don't have to worry about people finding out about you. Because everybody's looking at their own. They're all, self-aware and becoming, self-centered and da-da-da. They're all looking at their own stuff, so don't worry about your stuff and uncovering your stuff, because everybody's off into their own little thing in their own head trying to find out themselves. So it's not going to be a big deal. But sometimes our pride, our ego will prevent us, the edging God out, ego will prevent us from doing the work necessary to live a full life, a rich and full life. Ernest Holmes, in his book, It's Up to You, talked about it. He says, as individuals working out our freedom, we want to get away from argument, from hurts, from trying to force our opinions on others, from pretending, and from feeling that we have to suffer other people's criticism. This can be done in one and only one way: by seeing right through all this camouflage to the eternal spirit back of each one of us, the one mind in which we all live, move, and have our being. We are made of the same stuff. We are unified in love. With life, we talk in a universal language with which we can speak to the prince or the pauper. There's one way to restore our body temple to its physical wholeness. And that is to do the spiritual work necessary. That is by seeing right through all the camouflage to the eternal spirit back of each one of us. That is to recognize that I am not resentful that I have a misperception, that I have caused this by believing some lie. So really, I'm not resentful at you or you or you. You've just agreed to be that one person to be there, to stand in that placeholder, to remind me of the truth of who I am. You're the one who I can, quote unquote, blame and say, you rubbed me the wrong way. But in fact, when I really look and uncover and discover, I've rubbed myself the wrong way by having this misperception and by believing a lie. So I get to pause and I get to correct that in my own mind by recognizing the God within me, the God that is in you, the God that is the only life, the only power, the presence that is, the only thing that is real. And as I begin to recognize that that which is true of God is true of me, I begin to recognize that whether it's high blood pressure, low blood pressure, hardened arteries, skin irritation, whatever it is, I get to recognize that there's this thought that has lived within me that has caused that. And so I get to neutralize that thought. I get to recognize that there's one power, one presence, one life, that is God, that life is my life right now, that there's nothing, no thing that separates my life from that life of God. And that God's life is perfect, therefore my life is perfect. God's life is whole, therefore my life is whole. God is joy, love, peace, clarity, abundance. And so whatever the outpicturing, whatever my body temple is telling me, it's a wake-up call. Wake up. You're believing a lie. This irritation is self-induced. Wake up to this truth. The truth of God is the truth of me. The truth of God is the truth of you. The truth of God is the truth of each and every one of us. We are the perfect and divine way that love, joy, that peace, that abundance, that this life that is God is expressing. And it is up to us, like his book is titled, It's Up to You. It's up to you to recognize that in your life. So this week, take a look at what your body is telling you. Take a look at what your body is calling you forth to recognize. Take a look to see where you can begin to recognize that maybe there's these hidden beliefs within you that kind of need to be brought to the light and exposed for the lie in which they are. And that once you see that they're the light, you can just let them go and take on the truth of who we are. Take on the truth of who you are. And a lot of that is done in our spiritual practice. Like in our prayers, our meditation, whether it's surfing, whether it's doing a release prayer, whether it's being with loved ones, whatever it is that we deem as sacred and make a sacred practice, it gets to remind us that there's nothing that can separate my life from the life of God. There is nothing that can separate me from my wholeness, from my truth, from my joy, from my abundance. So right now, we're going to do that. We're going to enter the silence for a few minutes. And I think that Ernest Holmes had a little prayer in here. Didn't he, Sonny? Didn't you read a prayer that he had in here? Top of 191? All right, let's go to top of 191. And as you simply begin to allow yourself to be at peace, and as you just begin to close your eyes and allow yourself to recognize the one power, the one presence, the one life that is living in, through, and as you. Ernest Holmes provided us a prayer today on page 249. Yeah. It's in our reading for today. And he says that our prayer for today, our treatment for today, is that there is no irritation. There is no frustration. There is no resentment in my life. Any sense of inner agitation is now wiped away. And in its place, there comes a warm sense of my oneness, in essence and experience, with all the good there is. There comes a warm sense of my oneness, in essence and experience, with all the good there is. The center of my being is understanding and intelligence. I am calm, poised, and at peace with the world. So if we just begin to really be with that for a few minutes, that I'm calm, poised, at peace with the world, and really tap into that sense of oneness, recognizing that God is all there is, and that God is living as me right now.